Hello, my lovers. We are back to our ngoja. Nishafika chapter 7. Oh my god, just like that. Tuko chapter 7. Hata siamini. Imagine me in chapter 7. But we still have a long way to go because that is the much we have to read. And this is the much we have read so far. So anyway, as usual, you know, every single chapter lazima ikuwe na quote. So quote ya chapter 7 ni he had the sort of face that makes you realize God does have a sense of humor. The quote is by Bill Bryson. Let's continue. It was almost 4 in the morning when I finally crawled into bed. Granted, I'd been up that late before on New Year's Eve, but then it had been the result of an unfortunate combination of tequila and karaoke. I promptly saw off. God, I never chapter 7. Nimefika chapter 7. Wow. Hadi mwenye siamini. Tuko chapter 7. Let me just start. It was almost 4 in the morning when I finally crawled into bed. Granted, I'd been up that late before on New Year's Eve, but then it had been the result of an unfortunate combination of tequila and karaoke. I promptly saw off karaoke the next afternoon. This time, my late night was due to relentless questioning by a humorless detective. All things considered, I preferred the tequila stroke karaoke debacle. What is debacle? Oh, debacle. Ina sound kama a familiar word. Even with all its nasty after effects, the detective who had been put in charge of the case was a burly man by the name of Stewart. As far as I could tell, he had no first name. He was about 40 years old with thick black hair, cropped shorts. His hazel eyes hinted at a sense of humor and were framed by the thickest lashes I'd ever seen wasted on a man. But after spending less than 5 minutes with him, I found myself mentally humming the Eagles' hit Lying Eyes. I was glad Aunt Winnie had agreed to my suggestion that the reading room, rather than her cramped office, be used for the questioning. But even settled in the relative comfort of a stuffed yellow chair, the interview process with the detective Stewart was a painful one. He had seated himself in the only hard-backed chair in the room, no doubt to lend an air of authority to his questioning. I suppose he felt it would be difficult to intimidate his subjects while being half swallowed by a gaily patterned club chair. But after my seemingly endless interview with him, I realized the man would be doubting, even if lodging on a pool raft with an umbrella drink in his hand. After asking standard questions such as my name, age, and address in a raspy voice remi- reminiscent of the chair of the chain smoking and reminiscent of the chain smoking ants on the Simpson, he launched into the heart of his interrogation. Where were you when the lights went out? I refrained from asking if that was the title of a song and obediently answered, I was standing near the sideboard, opposite the door. Right. And where was Mr. Ramsey in relation to you? He he was still sitting at the dinner table. It was in front of me, to my right. What was he doing? He'd been glaring at Daniel or Polly or both of them, but I didn't say that. Instead, I said he was watching his daughter on the dance floor. I see. And how was his demeanor? He didn't seem pleased. Detective Stewart looked up from his notes. Really? Any idea why? I couldn't think of the least 8 reasons off the top of my head. But somehow, it didn't seem right to assign motives to a dead man. I shrugged. Not really. Detective Stewart didn't respond. Instead, he stared at me. I wish I could say my courage rises with every attempt to intimidate me, but I can't. Instead, my reaction is pavilion. My palms began to sweat and all the moisture evaporates from my mouth. In fact, his piercing gaze produced such a pronounced reaction in me that I briefly wondered if it was a skill taught at the police academy. If Detective Stewart noticed my reaction, he gave no indication. He merely noted my answer and moved on to the next question. Who else was near him? I tried to remember. No one really, I said. Everyone else was milling about the room. Miss Ramsey was the only one still sitting. Okay. And when the lights went out, did you know that your aunt was going to turn off the lights? No, I didn't. She told us afterward that she was supposed to do it for the show, but I didn't know that in advance. I see. Did anyone else? I don't know. I mean, the actors must have been aware, but I thought about it. While I hadn't known that the lights were going to go out, I wasn't surprised when they did. Why? I was struggling to figure out why when it came to me and Twinnie's invitation, Miss Parker. Detective Stewart prompted. I was just remembering the invitation for this party. It it said something about screams in the dark. I was wondering why I wasn't surprised about the lights at the time. I must have been I must have been because of the invitation. I see. Can I get a copy of the invitation? Yes, my aunt kept an extra one. Good, okay. Now, what happened after the lights went out? Well, at first, I think everyone thought it was part of the show. I mean, there was no sense that anything was wrong. I saw a flash of green, then I heard a gunshot, and someone screamed. Detective Stewart interrupted. A man or a woman? I considered the question. It was a woman, I said finally. His pen scribbled, Thank you. I'm sorry, you said you saw a flash of green? Yes, I guess it was the gun going off, but that didn't make sense. I had seen the flash before, I heard the shot. And then what happened? He prompted. Well, there's really not much else. I heard the plates and glasses shattering. I guess that's when I first thought that something seemed odd. I mean, I doubt if these actors usually break the hostess good china. He nodded in his notebook. Anything else? Someone pushed past me, and then the lights went back on. I saw Eric's face. He's one of the actors, and that's when I really knew that something was wrong. He looked horrified. Did you know who pushed you? No, I just assumed it was someone moving around in the room. From what direction did he come? He ran toward me. He noted all this down. By this point I was nauseous and more than a little panicky. The last time I had been interviewed by a policeman, I was 16 and had been pulled over for speeding. The officer's name was Ed Tig, and he couldn't have been more than 25. In the end, he had left me off with a warning, but I had been so shaken from the encounter that when I got home, I promptly threw up. Detective Stewart was about a million miles away from Officer Tig. Plus, he had that scary stare thing on his side. What exactly was your relationship with the deceased? I had no relationship with him, I replied. I'd just met him this evening. I served him some hors d'oeuvres. Detective Stewart studied me for a long time after I said this, as if he was debating the ver- vers- veracity of my statement. Finally, he wrote something in his little battered black notebook, no doubt something like suspect is unstable and unreliable. I was now officially nervous. Unfortunately, when I get nervous, I tend to get chatty, which explained why I added. He seemed particularly fond of the crab cakes. Detective Stewart frowned. After a long pause, he said, are you trying to be flip, Miss Parker? No, I mumbled, embarrassed. All right. How did Mr. Ramsey seem to you tonight? Well, having never met him before, I really couldn't say. I understand that, but why don't you just give me your general impression of his behavior this evening? As I'd been raised a strict Catholic, it has been ingrained in me not to speak ill of the dead. My personal view was that Gerald Ramsey was a self important controlling bastard, but I opt for a more sedate version. Sedate version. He seemed to be enjoying himself. My evasion did not go unnoticed. Detective Stewart leaned as far back as the wooden chair would allow. Raising his left eyebrow slightly, he said, come now, Miss Parker. This isn't a cocktail party where it isn't polite to gossip. Clearly, he and I went to completely different kinds of cocktail parties. This is a murder investigation, he continued, as if addressing a particularly slow child. I need absolute honesty, not polite double talk. Now, if you can't do that, we can continue this conversation at another time and in another place. I was relieved that he hadn't said downtown. If he had, my strained nerves would surely have given way to a fit of giggles. I had seen downtown on my ride in yesterday. It consisted of four antique stores, three gourmet bakeries, two centers, and more boutique than you could shake a credit card at. I certainly wasn't the kind of it wasn't the kind of atmosphere that inspired fear, unless maybe you were a recovering shopaholic. Nevertheless, something about his tone got under my skin. I sat up a bit straighter and looked him direct in the eye. Fine, you want my opinion of the man? I'll tell you. He struck me as a controlling, disagreeable, pompous ass. I don't know what was like what he was like on the other night of his life, but that's how he was on his last. For a second, I thought he was going to laugh. His eyes glittered and his mouth twitched a little, but he merely said, I see. You didn't like him. That's interesting. Crap, now what had I done? I tried to undo the damage. No, Detective Stewart. I didn't like him. No, Detective Stewart. I didn't like him. But if you are insisting that I killed a man because I didn't like him, may I just add that there are a lot of people I don't particularly like. My boss for one. She thinks running her clothes to the dry cleaners is part of my job description. I'm also not particularly fond of the checkout clerk who routinely comments on my purchase. And don't get me started about my mother's boyfriend. But I think you'll find, Detective Stewart, that I didn't kill any of them. Detective Stewart's eyebrows rose so high they were in danger of disappearing into his hairline. Are you always this angry, Miss Parker? I sighed. No, I think I'm usually a very nice person, but it's been a stressful night. I can understand that, he said, and I'm sorry to add to your apparently considerable stress level, but we do need to get as much information about what happened here tonight as we can. Let's try this again. He read something in his notebook and said, why don't we skip over Mr. Ramsey for now? Other than to note that he was not to your liking, I searched his face for any traces of irony but found none. Who did he talk to? I closed my eyes trying to remember. When he first arrived, he was with his wife, daughter, and their friend, Daniel Sims. I replied, but they weren't really talking to each other. Mr. Ramsey did all the talking. I vividly remember what happened next. Gerald had all but threatening Aunt Winnie that he would force her to sell him the inn. Gerald's words hadn't bothered Aunt Winnie in the least. She wasn't afraid of bullies, and she wouldn't have lost a minute's sleep over his threat. But I knew Aunt Winnie and the police didn't. To an outsider, their exchange about the house could look incriminating. I had to make sure that Detective Stewart didn't get the wrong idea about Aunt Winnie. He commented on the changes that my aunt had made to the inn since she had purchased it. I continued. From what he said, I gathered that when this place went on the market, Mr. Ramsey was interested in buying it, but the owner took a liking to my aunt instead. Mr. Ramsey indicated that he was still interested in owning the place and was hoping to convince my aunt to sell it to him. I remembered what Aunt Winnie had said about Gerald's influence and the zoning board, and I could still hear Gerald's by fair mean or foul threat. He was, in my opinion, somewhat rude about the whole thing, but my aunt just laughed it off there. That should downplay the exchange on the off chance that any of the other guests had repeated Gerald's exact words. Detective Stewart thumbed through his note. Apparently, it's in searching of something. Finding it, he tapped his blunt forefinger against the page and said, I have I have here that Mr. Ramsey was using his influence with the zoning board to put your aunt out of business you and threatened your aunt regarding the inn. Shit, I had a little doubt who would have repeated that bit of information to the police and silently cast Jackie. Threatened, I said with what I hoped was an authentic tone of disbelief. Mr. Ramsey was, I suppose, confident in his skills as a persuader, but he clearly didn't know my aunt. She loves this place. Even before he continued, I knew I had phrased that badly, but still, the starkness of his next words took me by surprise. Enough to kill for it? No, I said, scrambling to undo the damage. You have got it all wrong. My mouth went dry and my heart hammered in my chest. The police couldn't suspect Aunt Winnie. It was absurd. My aunt is the sweetest woman I know. As a kid, she wouldn't even let me kill spiders in her house. Yes, she loves this inn, but she's not insane. And besides, she's not the kind of woman to let herself be pushed around by someone like Mr. Ramsey. She can take care of herself. I realized I was shouting and struggled to compose myself. Detective Stewart said nothing but raised his left eyebrow again, a trick I found increasingly irritating. So, by your account, he said slowly, your aunt, who was being bullied by the deceased, could have had nothing to do with this, despite the fact that the murder took place in her home after she turned out the lights. In short, according to you, she is a harmless woman incapable of violence. Yes, I said empathetically. Even on some far-flaring memory swam to my surface of my consciousness. Hadn't there been a terrible altercation between Antoine and a friend's husband long ago? As the details came back to me, I inwardly blanched. But surely the police here couldn't know about that, could they? And besides, that had been a completely different situation. In that case, Antoine's action had been justified, almost noble in fact, but to someone of limited imagination, I sized up Detective Stewart and said, it could it could look damning. I resolved to say nothing of the incident. Besides, I continued in a calmer voice, how do you even know that Gerald was the intended victim? I mean, it was pitch dark in the room. Any one of us could have been shot. We considered that possibility, Miss Parker. However, there is no question that Mr. Ramsey was the intended victim. We found a piece of reflective tape, the kind that glows in the dark, on Mr. Ramsey's suit coat. That was probably the green flash you saw. It is our theory that the murderer put the type on Mr. Ramsey to ensure that he or she wouldn't have any trouble hitting the target once the light went out. Derringers, Derringers generally hold only one or two shots. Our killer couldn't risk wasting bullets. Then you believe that one of the guests did this? There is a door to the outside in the dining room. Someone could have opened the door, shot Gerald, and then ran off. Yes, funny enough, but we actually came up with that possibility on our own. Miss Parker, however, unless you are suggesting our murder can fly, I don't think that theory works. Well, there are footprints in the snow just outside the door. There are no tracks leading away from the house. Furthermore, the footprints outside the door were not fresh. A significant amount of snow had fallen on top of them, so much to say that it seems unlikely that an intruder made them at the time in question. Did you happen to see anyone go outside during the evening? He asked. Yes, actually. Joan Anderson and Polly Ramsey went outside. Do you know about what time that might have been? I tried to remember. Maybe around 8:30. I'm really not sure. I know I was still passing around the hot divorce. I had just refilled my tray in the kitchen and I was returning to the dining room when they came back inside. Detective Stewart noted something down before he continued. Do you know what they were doing out there? They said they were looking at the snow. The eyebrow went up again. Looking out the window wasn't sufficient. It was an interesting point. I had been too busy making my rounds at the moment. But now that I thought about it, it was strange. I don't care how much of a kid you are at heart. Adult adult women in the evening gowns gowns generally do not willingly go out in the middle of a snowstorm unless there is a car has broken down or they have partaken too much of the holiday spirit. As far as I could tell, neither Joa nor Polly had too much to drink. One of the many ununiformed officers who had descended on the inn quietly walked into the room. Avoiding my eyes, he went straight to the detective steward, leaning in close, and whispered in his ear. Detective Steward whispered back, and they both glanced at me. I tried to radiate innocence and stared at the contents of the evidence box while they continued their conversation. In one sealed bag lay the gun, in another lay the unisex right-handed glove worn by the killer. Hearing a noise in the foyer, I saw the medical examiner putting on his coat to leave. Behind him, two officers rolled the gurney, bearing the body of Gerald Ramsey out of the dining room and towards the door. The words from Antwini investigation came back to me. Many will come, one won't one won't be going home. I felt sick. The officer finally left and the detective steward shifted his attention back to me. Sorry about the interruption. Let's see. Where were we? He contemplated his notebook. Oh yes. How did Miss Ramsey act around her father? I thought of how Polly and I had stood talking after she had come back inside. When Gerald called her over like an errant dog, there was no mistaking that mistaking the look of hate on her face, but I felt funny about telling the detective what I had seen. I was sure that most people who encountered Gerard Ramsey had, at one point or another, maybe a similar face. It seemed unfair to cast Polly in a guilty light over what I considered an honest and just emotion. But I reminded myself someone in the room tonight had shot Gerald. I knew it wasn't me and I knew it wasn't Aunt Winnie. My main goal was to convince the police of that. As for the others, well, I'd just have to tell what I knew and let the police sort out the rest. Feeling like a parrot reciting my lines, I dutifully told the detective steward that I thought Polly resented her father. Dictatorial nature, and that while I thought Lauren was family under Gerald's control, they seemed unhappy. I did not, however, repeat Jackie's unfound assertion that she suspected Lauren of having an affair with Daniel. I told myself that it was because I didn't want to spread vicious rumors, but I wouldn't have wanted to be hooked up to the lie detector when I made that statement. The simple fact was, right or wrong, I liked Daniel. I had little information about Joan and Henry, or Jackie, and Lynette. I had even less about the acting troupe, unless argumentation was a crime. As for Peter, I could have told the detective stories that would have set his hair on end and no doubt resulted in Peter's immediate incarceration. But as they had nothing to do with the night's event, I restrained myself. However, Detective Stewart did seem oddly interested in the fact that Peter's parents were in the hotel business. After an eternity of pregnant pauses, raised eyebrows, and seemingly random scribbling into his ever-present notebook, Detective Stewart stood up. Well, thank you very much for your cooperation, Miss Parker. I think I have everything I need for tonight. You can go now, but if you think of anything, please call me. He pushed a small white card at me. I took it and stared at the name on it. Your first name is Aloy Aloysius. I blurted out impolitely. He read he reddened a bit. He reddened a bit. Yes. I was about to ask if he'd really been named for Sebastian's bear in Brideshead Revisited. But the question died on my lips under his worthing expression. It was clear that the subject was off limits. I stood up awkwardly, my legs stiff, while I struggled to comprehend that the blurry, graphene man standing before me could have been named for an effeminate man's bear companion. As Alice had said when she fell through the rabbit hole, things are getting curiouser and curiouser. As I turned to leave the room, I caught sight of myself in the heavily gilded mirror by the door. My eyes were bloodshot, my skin was blotchy, and my chigon had long ago come undone, leaving my hair hanging in a bedraggled mess around my face. The, the last time I had looked this bad at the end of an evening, I'd had a hell of a better time to show for it. I was at the door when Detective Stewart spoke. Oh, and one more thing, Miss Parker, I said. The man clearly had watched too many episodes of Columbus, Colombo at an impressionable age. I whirling turned back, his lips stretched and twisted into a natural position, and it took me a minute to realize that he was actually trying to smile. I'd prefer if you didn't leave town for the next couple of days. I didn't bother asking why. I was pretty sure it wasn't because he wanted to ask me out to dinner. And just like that, we are done with chapter 7. Oh my god. We're heading to chapter 8. So we are going to read our chapter 8 later on. Right now, what I want to do after finishing this read is go live or stream on my TikTok, and then we will catch up later. So thank you for being here, and thank you for just taking the time to watch this video and listening to me reading a book that maybe you might not even have any interest to, but you support me by watching my videos. So thank you for being here. Ciao. See you later.